And right now, here's CNN Newsroom with Heidi Collins. Removing a roadblock to research. President Obama reversing a Bush-era stem cell policy. How the move changes science and politics. Pastor gunned down in the pulpit. Parishioners screaming and praying. What we've learned about the shooter. And sign of the times. Ad for janitor's job gets overwhelming response. It is Monday, March 9th. I'm Heidi Collins. You are in the CNN Newsroom. Up first this morning, it's a political minefield almost as volatile as abortion. And President Obama is about to wade into it. Later this morning, he'll lift federal limits on stem cell research. Is this a matter of finding cures or playing God? There's a lot to explain. CNN senior medical correspondent Elizabeth Cohen is looking at the science, and White House correspondent Suzanne Malveaux lays out the politics. Let's go ahead and begin with some background now from Suzanne.
The executive order today, the fulfillment of a controversial campaign promise.
If we are going to discard those embryos, and we know that there's potential research that could lead to curing debilitating diseases, Alzheimer's, Lou Gehrig's disease, if that possibility presents itself, then I think that we should, in a careful way, go ahead and pursue that research.
President Obama's order will direct the National Institutes of Health to develop revised guidelines on federal funding for embryonic stem cell research within 120 days. It will allow scientists to apply for government grants to support any stem cell research. Under President Bush, taxpayer money for embryonic stem cell research was limited to be used for just a small number of stem cell lines that had already been created from destroyed embryos.
Without crossing a fundamental moral line, by providing taxpayer funding that would sanction or encourage further destruction of human embryos that have at least the potential for life.
Obama administration officials say this is a broader effort to end the Bush administration's practice of putting ideology over science. Critics who oppose the research argue that federal funding could lead down a slippery moral slope.
Federal funding of embryonic stem cell research can bring on embryo harvesting, perhaps even human cloning that occurs. We don't want that. That shouldn't be done. That's wrong.
Supporters say the new policy opens the door for research that may lead to cures for diabetes, Parkinson's disease, and spinal cord injuries.
My religion teaches me to heal the sick, and God gave us this intelligence to find cures for the sick. I think it's a great moment.
Critics argue it is immoral to use stem cells from human embryos because it requires destroying them. They say stem cells taken from adult bone marrow, the skin, or placenta can also potentially create cells that will lead to curing disease. The issue crosses party lines, with notable Republicans Nancy Reagan, John McCain, and Arlen Specter in support of Obama's plan.
CNN White House correspondent Suzanne Malveaux joining me now from Washington. So, Suzanne, why is President Obama signing this executive order and then not really taking this to Congress instead to get a bill passed?
Well, Heidi, I spoke with a top White House official who essentially was saying this is something that President Obama has been grappling with over the last couple of weeks. It wasn't about if he would actually reverse this, but how it would happen. As you know, Congress could enact legislation to make this happen. He did it by executive order because essentially it doesn't take as much time. Congress has a lot on its plate, but the bottom line is he really wanted to put a stamp on this and say, look, he wants to make a distinction between what this administration sees as a real abuse from President Bush, and that is kind of putting policy or politics ahead of science. They're trying to make this point that when it comes to stem cell research, abortion, all the change, these type of issues, that science is going to be respected, Heidi.
All right. Well, Obama is certainly taking on a lot of issues right now. Why are critics calling it a diversionary topic when we get to this topic of stem cells?
Well, obviously, we're all looking at the economy and what is going to happen there, the housing crisis, the banking crisis, this type of thing. But we did hear from the director of the Office of Management and Budget, Peter Orszag, over the weekend, who said, look, this is not a diversionary tactic by any stretch of the imagination. This is taking a look at the economic crisis and saying, look, this might take months, even years to turn things around in the big picture here. So we're also going to take on these other controversial issues, these policies that were promised in the campaign, Heidi.
All right, we will be watching closely. Suzanne Malveaux from the White House this morning. Thanks, Suzanne. In Suzanne's report, we did hear from a couple of lawmakers. Let's go ahead and hear more now from Senator Claire McCaskill and Congressman Eric Cantor.
Why are we going and distracting ourselves from the economy? This is job number one. Let's focus on what needs to be done. But as far as the issue of stem cell research, I don't know anybody who is not supportive of that. What we're talking about here, though, is embryonic stem cell research and the question of federal funding of that. And frankly, federal funding of embryonic stem cell research can bring on embryo harvesting, perhaps even human cloning that occurs. We don't want that. That shouldn't be done. That's wrong.
So the fact that the president is willing to once again say to the rest of the world that we will be the beacon for cures and for hope. My religion teaches me to heal the sick, and God gave us this intelligence to find cures for the sick. I think it's a great moment. I'm proud of him for reversing that executive order that was President Bush's.
Representative Cantor and Senator McCaskill there. Time now for a fact check. Here to explain the science of embryonic stem cell research, senior medical correspondent Elizabeth Cohen. So, okay, this is a very big deal, obviously, but when we're talking about the science behind it, why stem cells? Why so significant?
Okay, I'm going to give sort of the simple version of that. Stem cells are basically blank cells, and scientists can go into a lab and they can try to turn them into specialty cells. For example, if someone has a heart attack, you can try to turn those blank cells into cardiac muscle cells to replace the muscle that's been damaged.
They can become very specific.
Exactly.
Right?
They can become very specific. That's the hope, is that they can make them specific and make them specific enough to help people.
All right, well, let's talk about the hope, because you kind of can't talk about this a whole entire issue if you don't talk about the science and the research behind it for what is expected by way of success in helping people.
Right. I think we have to be very clear about this. Embryonic stem cells have not helped a single human being at this point that we know of. There's great hope that they will eventually help people, but you know what? They may not turn out to work so well. That is a possibility. And I think that scientists are sort of keeping that in mind as they move ahead.
All right. Well, if they do become, much more successful, obviously you've got to continue the research if that's even a possibility. What diseases are we talking about here? We hear so much about Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Right. Well, three of the biggies that we're talking about are spinal cord injuries. Christopher Reeve, the actor Christopher Reeve, really pushed for this before his death, and actually there is now a clinical trial that is going to be underway soon. They're planning to put it underway soon to help people with the kinds of injuries that he has. So spinal cord injuries is definitely right there towards the top of the list. The other two are Parkinson's disease and diabetes. Michael J. Fox has worked on Parkinson's disease. Many people have worked on diabetes. So those are the three that we should expect to hear a lot about in the years to come. And I say years to come because this is not that kind of science.
No.
This is going to take a while. No, not even close.
Yeah, all right. Well, so we'll be watching that closely. The ethical concerns. We've already mentioned a little bit about them. And I think they're probably different for everybody.
Right. This is it's very simple what the concerns are. There is no way around it. To make an embryonic stem cell, you have to destroy an embryo. So the way it usually works is moms and dads who have fertility issues go to fertility clinics. They create embryos outside the womb in the lab. They often have embryos that they're not using to have a baby on their own. And so some of these parents say, you know what, I've got these quote-unquote extra embryos. I want to donate them to science. You have to destroy that embryo in order to make it useful. Now, for many people, they don't have a problem with that. That embryo maybe could never have started a child. That embryo maybe was going to sit in the lab forever and ever. Other people say an embryo is an embryo and you should never destroy it. It really depends how you feel about what an embryo is and what it's not.
Yeah, all right. Well, the topic will be, I think, in the forefront for quite some time. All right, our senior medical correspondent, Elizabeth Cohen. Thanks, Elizabeth. President Obama is talking about his decision on stem cell research later this morning. We're going to bring you his remarks live. Expected to speak at 11:45 Eastern, 8:45 Pacific. A new week on Wall Street gets going at the bottom.